let's begin. Make your way to the front. Alright, it's always wonderful to see how books bring people together, and we couldn't do anything of what we do, whether it's selling books, doing events, or fundraising for those in need, without people like you. Speaking of fundraising for those in need, Books Inc. has paired with a program that raises money to purchase books for kids at low-income schools. If you would like to contribute, to ask to have any purchase you might make rounded up by the cashier. It's usually just a difference of a few cents individually, but together it really all adds up. And as of a couple months ago, we've helped over 700 kids get books. All right. Now, normally I do the introduction, but we're doing something a little different, and I'm introducing you to the introducer. So, without further ado, let's begin.
Most of you probably know who Sky is, or you wouldn't be here, but in case you wandered in off the street, I'll tell you a little bit about Sky. My name is Leah Gertner, and I first met Sky Nelson Isaacs while living in a vegetarian co-op down the street at UC Berkeley when we were in college. And conversations with Sky were always enlightening and enlivening, and Sky has always been exploring the connection between science, spirituality, and synchronicity. Sometimes, if I was lucky, these conversations would be followed by a little concert, Sky playing piano, guitar, singing some of his originals. He's an amazing jazz pianist. It's been fun to follow his work as a physicist, musician, and author. He went on to get a master's degree and a teaching credential in physics. Sky also went on to produce 10 albums of original music. He's written numerous articles on synchronicity, and he speaks at spiritual centers across the U.S. He researches theoretical quantum physics and the nature of time. He has published work in reputable academic journals and also went on to found the Synchronicity Institute. Sky has authored 2 influential books, and I don't know if they're here. Are they here?
Yeah.
Okay. 2 influential books here, published by North Atlantic Books. Living in Flow, The Science of Synchronicity and How Your Choices Shape Your World, and Leap to Wholeness, How the World is Programmed to Help Us Grow, Heal, and Adapt. When he's not writing, researching, and performing, you can find Sky, from what I've heard, standing on the lab bench doing physics demonstrations for the students at El Cerrito High, where he's a high school teacher teaching physics, and who is really passionate about innovation and equity in STEM education. So without further ado, the man of the hour, Sky Nelson Isaacs.
Thank you, Leah. It's great to be here. Thanks for that lovely, warm introduction. So, it's great to see you all. Thank you for coming. We're talking about wholeness. And so I wrote this book. I want to start by telling you a little bit about why I wrote the book, where it came from. I imagine you're here, maybe because we talked and you know me, but also because you're interested in the topic of wholeness, whatever that means to you. When I wrote my first book, Living in Flow, I had been studying synchronicity for a long time. Synchronicity is like a coincidence that changes your world in some way. Running into somebody on the street that you didn't expect to see, but it changes your trajectory that day. And people ask, well, where does that come from? And I realized I wanted to write a book following up on that, about the science that I study, that I've thought about for a long time. And it's really about wholeness. Because if synchronicity is hard to understand, because if you're thinking of yourself as separate from the world, and only the things in front of you being real, or is that the way to say it? A synchronicity happens because you're connected to something much bigger than yourself. Somebody pops out of the corner of the street who you know, because you're actually connected to a much wider field of possibilities. So that's really about wholeness, seeing the world as a big connected field. And what's beautiful is that there's actually a lot of science to that people don't quite realize it's pretty mainstream. So I wanted to write about that with my special flair for experiential learning. So I immediately, the title came right away, and then I wrote the book in the following year. Actually, I wrote the book in about 3 months. In the middle of that 3 months, the pandemic hit. And so the book is really a opening into what was going on for me in my thinking about this connectedness during the pandemic. Seeing so many people being isolated, feeling disconnected. And so I really love that it just had that context. I wish it could have reached people right then, but it had to get written, published. And when it came out, we were closed, so we couldn't do an event. So it's been a few years, and we just, thanks to Skylar and the team here, circle back. So thank you for coming. I want to start with a reading. The main idea in this book is about filters. The main science idea is about filters. Filters are ways that we limit what we see, what we perceive, based upon our pre-existing notions, our concepts that already exist in our brain that limit what we're able to understand about the world we inhabit. For me, combating isolation means discovering and sharing feelings that I don't usually share. My feelings remain private, either because they are too sensitive or because I don't realize they're there. It was not until recently that I gained perspective on some of these behaviors picked up in middle school. I felt so lonely back then. I wanted to be liked and have close friends. Having close friends had been easy when I was very young, but in middle school, I felt like I really had to work at it. To feel like I was in my friend group, I had to constantly monitor the other boys. I was looking for whether they were going to tease me, criticize me in some way. I was on the lookout for situations that would cause me shame or embarrassment. I tried to impress my friends so I would be accepted, and I hid my struggle from everybody. With each decision, I fought to be loved. It was hard to take risks, because I simply couldn't handle being exposed in front of my peers. Everything I felt inside was too tender to share. Too tender. I recall the day after my favorite cat was hit by a car and killed. At school, I simply had to cry. Tears were streaming down my face during recess, but I wasn't with my quote-unquote friends. I was with another boy, Josh, who I felt safe to talk to. He was a good friend to me and helped me through that difficult day. Then the next day I went back to my regular friend group and tried to fit in again. Now, as an adult, I can see this tendency to hide. Instead of acting on it like I used to, I can share about it. I can learn more about myself, even as I deepen my relationships with others. I'm less compelled to try to impress others, to gain the connection that I want. I still do it, but when I notice it, I get honest and share about it. Being vulnerable doesn't have to revolve around pain. Laughing serves the same purpose. Or sitting together in awe of the sunset. Or yelling at the TV together while watching the Super Bowl. Being connected is a personal choice. If we want what is known, what we want is to be known in our wholeness. If what we want is to be known in our wholeness, then it is necessary to identify for ourselves who we are as whole selves. I think this is the struggle against isolation. It is a struggle to allow others to know who we are, and in the process, to know ourselves. It is striving to see ourselves reflected in the world. And that's what synchronicity is. That's what those moments of connection are when we realize we're part of something bigger than ourselves. It's seeing ourselves reflected. Our intentions, our values, our worth, reflected in some situation that we didn't create ourselves. And that comes from wholeness, the wholeness of the cosmos. Jumping ahead, the risk in this process is that if we focus solely on changing external factors, we might try to solve challenges such as climate change with the same qualities that have led to the underlying dilemmas in the first place. If we cannot resolve the things that isolate us, our tendencies towards righteous anger, for instance, would it take that back. If we cannot resolve the things that isolate us, our tendencies towards righteous anger, manipulation of others, and desire to tightly control the outcomes of our efforts, our solutions will merely create new problems. In his book, Climate, A New Story, Charles Eisenstein coaxes us away from our attempts to conquer climate change. So this perpetuates the warlike mentality that has created the problem in the first place. Instead, by healing oneself and returning to the joy-filled, wondrous world that one experienced in nature as a child, one reconnects with their true motivation for being environmentally conscious. Climate change is a wound to be healed, not a problem to be solved. As a person of privilege, without understanding my culture's history and the stories of marginalized people, for instance, my efforts are likely to repeat the oppressive structures of the past. This is not just about studying the histories of other people, it's about studying my own inner history. What are the lessons I took away from my youth? How did I learn to respond when I felt threatened? What do I believe about the values of my voice? In what situations do I find it difficult to listen to others? Where in my life am I overly certain? Dealing with external problems is not separate from the internal problems that we face. By seeking to understand wholeness, we're invited to continually turn our attention back to the inner causes of polarization and unhappiness. When we cease to feel isolated, we cease to allow ourselves to be polarized. Through connection, we find more happiness. And through happiness, it becomes more difficult to marginalize the perspectives of others. The more we feel included, the more we are drawn to include others. So that's the first stab at wholeness, how it shows up in my life at times. So I wanted to jump into another part of the book, and hello, welcome in the back. Good to see you. Some of my students are here from school. It's great to be supported by these great young minds. Smiling faces, I see them every day in class. It's great, all around the room. And so this next section is about self-compassion. How do we get around our filters? Filters are ways that we get stuck in ruts of perceiving and thinking. And one way to get through that is self-compassion, or compassion in general. So this is what I have to say about that. Self-compassion is a gift that we neither understand nor observe, nor deserve. We don't have to earn self-compassion. It is not a reward for good behavior. Even with our many faults, if we are compassionate with ourselves, our hard edges will gradually become softer and our problems will ease. This is the essence of grace. We don't have to ask for permission to be compassionate with ourselves. We don't have to have a certain GPA or salary. We can choose to be compassionate with ourselves any time. This doesn't free us from consequences. Rather, it helps us fully account for our mistakes. Self-compassion brings humility and makes reconciliation possible. Self-compassion is a practice. Even the act of not being compassionate gives our critic ammunition against us. You should have been more compassionate with yourself. I'll never get it right. How do we escape this perpetual loop of self-critique? This is my experience, I don't know. Self-compassion is a leap. It's the leap to wholeness. Self-compassion is a clean break from the cycle of feeling bad about ourselves. We don't have to wait until we have enough evidence that we are a good person, worthy of love. We'll never find enough evidence for that. Our filters are constantly coloring our perceptions. We don't need to understand or feel that we deserve the grace of self-forgiveness and self-appreciation. We just take it because it is there to be taken. Yeah. So let's talk about the science. We're going to go to some slides.
Online people, can you talk closer to the mic for people?
No,
online?
I got it.
Can you all hear me? Should I speak up louder?
Separate mic.
You can hear me. Awesome. Thank you. So the way this shows up in science in an interesting way, this relationship between parts that we observe in the world that we think of as the world separateness. You and me are separate. We are separate from the East Coast, from different countries. Our desires and dreams are far out there in the future, separate from us right now. We're not connected to the bigger picture in that worldview. That's what I would call pixels. Your pixel on the screen is separate and distinct. I'm going to talk about the science of patterns. So let's go for it. This is a pattern of stripes. What's interesting about this pattern is it exists across the entire field, the entire screen. Just go about 1 second. So they get more complex as you add more layers. More complex, it seems even more random. More random. But there's an image appearing, some order appearing. You start to see that there's some substance there. That's good. Stop there for a second. So this is a city image that emerged out of the information of those patterns. You couldn't see that. So let's go to the next slide of the video. To watch it unfold in real time, the patterns unfold and show you that there's really the image hidden inside that information. And it's the relationships between all those patterns that gives you the final picture. Those relationships. That's what's so special about the pattern perspective. Pixels are independent entities. They're put there on the screen because some programmer told you to put it there. But the patterns are relational. They're all connected. So let's go to the next slide. Watch them together. On the left we have the pixel version. They're emerging an image from pixels. On the right we have patterns. Same image in the end. Same thing we're creating. But the process is very different. This is over here so you can see my live stream. The process is very different. When we created this one on the right, well, on the left we can remove a building really easily from the pixels, just by not putting those pixels down. We cut them out really distinctly with like a scissor tool on the computer. On the right, we cannot do that. We can't simply remove a building. Let's go to the next one. Let's see how this works. So this pattern will be represented by the following dots in what's called the frequency domain. Go ahead. These dots would just represent the frequencies associated with that previous pattern. It's just math. If you tune out with math, just very short. Next one. Different pattern. Could be this. Stripes going sideways. The mathematical frequencies would be the following. Those two dots. And so if you have angles, the next pattern would be like this. That would be represented by these two dots. So you just have these dots that represent frequencies. What's cool is that when you put them all together, all these dots, get the next thing. Looks like just a gray wash, but it's got some structure to it. There's some whiter spots here and gray speckles all along here. Those are all dots representing frequencies. This looks random in a way, but it's actually a recipe. A recipe for this. When you put the patterns together in just the right relationship to each other, you get the real world. When I saw this in my studies in college, I immediately, and this is true in music too, immediately saw that there's a deeper structure to the universe that just stands out. Connection. How to see it. If I wanted to remove one of these buildings using patterns, I couldn't do it. You can't just remove a section. If I do that, go ahead to the next slide. It's called a filter. I remove part of the frequencies on the outside of the black part there in the frequencies, and I blur the image. Because blurry image means you've taken away the details of the edges. Edges are where things change very fast in color, from light to dark or dark to light. That's an edge. And so that's called the high frequency. We can do it even further. Remove even more of those high frequencies, you get more blur. And further, even more blur. We're affecting the whole picture all at once with these distinct mathematical changes. We can do the opposite process, which is starting from removing the low frequencies. Go ahead and do that. So here's the original image. Remove the low frequencies and you get just the edges. I've highlighted all the edges immediately with one small change. So this is like a way in which the universe, or at least the images, are holistic, right? You could change to one small section of them, and it affects everything. That stands out to me as a really important principle. Let's go to the next. So I realized towards the end of the writing of the book, I was writing the preface, which is the first section, and I realized sort of the main point. In physics, we ask this question: how do we get something from nothing? How do we get the universe out of the void? The Big Bang was like 13.8 billion years ago. How do you get the universe in the Bible or the Torah? You get it from the creation moment when there's a void that explodes into the creation of reality by the Creator. We also think about this in our lives, you know. We go to work because if we don't do that, we'll have an empty bank account. Like, without doing anything, there's nothing there. That's the premise. But I started to ask a different question. What exists is a pattern space in which everything is already existing. We're carving away from that, filtering it out. Then go to the next slide. It's how do we get something from everything? How do we see the world as starting as whole? And removing, carving away parts of that to reveal what it is that we want to see. And think about the story I told with when my kitty died as a kid. I met this friend Josh, who I didn't consider a friend. But he was really good to me that day. He listened to me, he helped me feel okay. And when that was over, I felt better the next day. I went back to my old friends. I couldn't see that he was a friend. My filters were like, these people are my friends. This guy's not the kind of person that I'm friends with. That was my brain filtering out those possibilities that would have served me really well. And I wonder, I was just thinking about this, like what my life would have been like if I had learned how to see good friends at that age, you know? Not try to please these other people that I wasn't connected to. I think a lot would have been different. I'll learn that later, but that would have been, if I had just made friends with Josh that day, who knows what could happen. So how do we get something from everything? Let's go one more slide. Think about a rainbow. A rainbow is white light coming from the sun, bouncing off the clouds, and coming back to our eyes. And in doing so, it spreads into the colors: red, blue, yellow, green. And when you see red, it's because there was white light before. The whole spectrum was there. You removed blue and green and yellow. When you see blue, you've removed the red. So you're starting with the whole picture and removing parts of it to reveal what you want to see. So a rainbow, and often us, are beautiful because of what is not there. What we limit, or concepts we take away that are no longer true for us. I don't think we have to create a better life for ourselves or better people in ourselves, but we just limit some of the patterns we've developed in life that are controlling our ability to feel love, acceptance, appreciation, gratitude, success, health. The more we can see those filters acting in our lives, the more we can try different things. That's my hope. So I'm a teacher, and I like to tell stories, and I like to give worksheets. So you have a worksheet on your chair. How are we doing on time? 7:30? Good. Come on and take a seat if you guys want.
There's some empty chairs.
Come on and sit down. Over here on this side.
Go on that side.
Sky, do we need to pass out those pencils? Are you good? Does anyone have a
Yeah.
pencil?
So the monk passes out. So if you're in my class, in my freshman class, you've seen this already. The multiverse and counterfactual reasoning. I included that language to make sure you understood we're dealing with real science. While we're passing that out, I'll mention I was blessed to know this man named Henry Staff, who's a physicist at Berkeley, a mentor. He developed this concept in the understanding of quantum mechanics called counterfactual reasoning. Counterfactual reasoning is this idea of what would the world have been like if I had done a different thing? What would my life be like if I took a different job? What would it be like if I took a different route to work this morning? What would it have been like if I didn't do my homework? What would have happened if? It's called the counterfactual. Counter, opposite, the facts. So this worksheet is about understanding the multiverse. So pretend you're Spider-Man for a minute. And think of an important event in your life. Now this could really be anything. Could be arriving here today. Could be where you work, how you got that job. Could be how you met a friend. How you ended up living in this part of the world. How you ended up becoming the person you are. But it could be simple, like how you ended up choosing a restaurant for dinner. The power of this is that this tree model that is on the page represents the branching of the world around us, the possibilities of what happens to us. And it's really applicable at any time. Not just in big events, but in every part of the day. So think of some event in your life. Notable event. Write that down. Does anybody want a pencil? Pen? clipboards. There's a couple clipboards if you want to pull them out.
Where did the pens go? For you?
No, one clipboard. Fabric and
I'll take.
any of the pens and pencils around? Pass that red bucket around. I have an endless bucket of pencils in the classroom.
Anybody else
For
over
the
there?
students, yeah. So, think of an important event in your life. And copy this onto the diagram on the bottom, next to the apple labeled event. That's the outcome you're after. That's what happened. That's what actually happened. So you got your event, some notable event, and then you're writing down that happened on the right-hand side of the tree. How did you get there? Think back to how you got there. Think about 2 choices you made to get there. So I got here early. That was a nice thing, getting here early. That's my choice. Getting here early. Relax. How did I do that? Well, one thing I did was I left my food in the classroom. I trusted that I would have food here, and I said, I'm not going to go back to the classroom and get it. I'm fine. And I took, and the thing was, I chose the first parking spot I could get. I didn't look for the best spot. I made 2 choices that made me get here when I wanted to, and then I could relax. What are 2 choices you made to get to your event? That's 1A and 2A. Copy this onto the tree diagram on the branches. So 2A led to the event. 1A led to 2A. Come on in if you like. You're welcome to some seats up front, on the side. So I really appreciate Matt. He's a lovely, heartwarming guy, and that story. I love how he was adaptable. The story about socks. I like to show how plain and simple this can be. So this is from Kinchar Meredith, a friend of mine who's a musician. I ran out of the house in a rush on the way to church and realized I was experiencing an epic sock fail. I resigned myself to my clearly too small ankle socks, crawling down into my shoes. I arrived at church and went to my regular seat. And there I found a package wrapped in cheery yellow tissue from my friend Kelly. Her lovely note ended with, "Now I can share a smile with you." And it made my heart happy. I opened the gift and found a pair of smiley socks. Clean, dry, and not too small. And now a favorite of mine, I shared it with my daughter. Do you want to read it? All right. I'm going to come up and share with you. Give a round of applause. What's in it?
Okay, this is told in his point of view, but I'm Ellie. Ellie and I take our usual bike ride along the local bike path, but today we plan to take a detour down to Main Street to buy a new bike helmet. I get my directions wrong and accidentally arrive at Main Street quite a few blocks early. I'm disappointed since riding among traffic is not fun. But suddenly we pass over some inscriptions in the sidewalk and bring our bikes to a halt. We have just passed a memorial with 20 or so plaques dedicated to Japanese Americans from our local community who were sent to internment camps during World War II. This is amazing because Ellie is in the middle of a big school project on this topic. We take pictures of all the plaques, and the experience reinvigorates her enthusiasm for the school project. And I showed those photos in my project, and people liked it.
How do we end up in the right place here? How do we end up in the right place at the right time? We took a detour that we had to take. I was frustrated, but then we looked down on the ground and there was these plaques about her project, which we never would have seen in the world if they hadn't been there by accident. So now that you're here, let's do this other thing that I like. So I was being a parent and learning about parenting as I wrote this book, and the filters. How many of you are parents? Do you have any filters that guide your parenting? So this is child and parent conversation, version A.
I'm feeling nervous about my math test
When is it?
tomorrow.
Well, have you studied?
Yes, Mom/Dad. I studied, but my teacher just gave us the review sheet today.
Okay, well please go to get your review sheet from your room right now, and we'll go over it together.
I'm in the middle of my spelling homework. I have to do this too.
Come on, your math test is important. You spent the whole afternoon on this other stuff. I didn't realize you had a math test. Let's get to it.
Fine. Stomps off. Version B.
That's version A. That's what it's gone many times for me.
I'm feeling nervous about my math test
When is it?
tomorrow.
Is there something I can do to help?
No, I just need to go over it again. The teacher just gave us the review sheet today, but I have to finish my spelling first. Maybe you could help quiz me on that?
Sure, so you want me to just read you the words?
Confidently. Yeah, thanks.
There you have it. Thank you. So what's different for me? What's different for me?
You're more curious.
Softness and what?
Curious.
Curious. And what I heard you say was what was going on in my head, which is my filter. That I got rid of my own material, my own filter of like, I'm worried about how I was as a kid with math tests. I'm worried about how you're going to do based on how I did, what that means for me, that meant for me. When I, as a parent for myself, so much of what I parent from is like what I actually experienced myself, what I'm worried about myself. In that second conversation, I was able to get rid of some of that judgment that was actually about me, just listen and be more curious, like you said. I think it just opened up space for her to have a different experience. And the idea is hopefully that you still get to the math test and that all works out. With wholeness, you don't actually abandon your hopes and your dreams, just realize there's a bigger context in which it's all happening. And so you have to work with that instead of holding your position really firmly with curiosity and self-compassion and awareness of your filters. You can see what's really necessary in that moment. So I think we're quite at the end. Thank you so much for coming. And we have some Q&A. We want to leave time for Q&A. Thank you. There's a QR code here with an email list if you want to sign up for my email list. Take a picture and sign up. And I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A, so we're done early-ish so that we can do that. Questions? Yeah, there we go. Say your name.
Me,
Yeah,
Tony.
Tony.
Hi, I'm probably a bad question to start with, but I truly am curious about, of course it's good to have open hearts and more curiosity for sure, and think about our filters in terms of, you know, kind of closed-mindedness, but everything's really a filter even when you open that up. And when I think about synchronicity or, you know, things that happen because you made another decision, I mean, that's just life, right? We're always making decisions and we can't plan, you know, oh, I went to the coffee house and I met my partner because I was late and whatever. Something else would have happened if you didn't do that, but when important things happen, we kind of call them synchronicity. But that also can happen with really, really, really bad things. I won't say what they are, but somebody really open-hearted could be trying to be curious and make excellent decisions coming from an open, connected, loving place and come to a terrible end. And so that is synchronicity as well, just in terms of, so I just don't understand why we always talk about it in the positive.
I'll take the essence of that I hear, which is how come, you know, there's sort of a positive spin on this, but synchronicities are really kind of a neutral, positive, negative, doesn't really matter. It's about meaning, about reflecting yourself in the world. I really believe that's true. So first of all, I usually shy away from the deeper questions, which I think probably have a deeper answer around like really big life questions that we can't explain. Like I can't explain why certain things happen to me or anybody else. Doesn't mean that there's not a way to look at it, but if we back up from that ambitious goal and just look at simpler choices that we make, I think there's a lot of ground to be gained in more awareness of those small ones. And then I'll just give you an example. It was a really, really weird experience last year for me. I got hit with my car 3 times by hit and run in 1 year. It never happened to me before, ever. In the period of like 9 months, it happened 3 times. I was like, it was small stuff. Like I was parked in the parking lot, someone backed into me as they were pulling out. Totally not my fault, that one. Oh, I really mean that. Second time I was parked at a stop sign and a skateboarder came and hit the back of my car and I was like, what just happened? Goes past me and stops a block away. I'm like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, bye. I had a dent in my car. So I realized, and the third one was kind of similar. This person actually pulled off to get the license and they just plowed past me. At this point I was like, what's the message here? It's never happened before. And I realized what was coming up for me was each of these cases I sort of gave the person a lot of leeway and I was super kind in a situation where it wasn't really useful. So I do have a pattern of not standing up for myself And in this case, each time, the first thing I did was look at how I was to blame for the situation. I wasn't, but it was too late to sort of back up and say, look, I'm going to hold you accountable for this. And it happened 3 times so I could get the message. So, not a positive experience, right? But a learning one, nonetheless, a meaningful one. So maybe that extrapolates to other situations where it's really hard. I can't say for sure. But is there something in there that's opening you up? I think the goal is not to be successful or get what you want. It's to open you up to your deeper self, your whole self. As I said in the reading, if we want to experience our whole selves, let me find it. I think it's right here. So if we want to experience our whole selves in wholeness, we have to know who we are as a whole. And that comes from understanding our patterns that might be self-destructive or, keep us limited. Thank you. Any other questions? Or comments or stories? Yeah.
Kind of a question or a comment. I was expecting this book to be more science oriented, because I've heard you talk a lot about science. And this book just seems like really deeply philosophical. So I'm curious, what motivated you to write? Actually, it struck me as very spiritual. So I'm curious, what motivated you to write sort of like a spiritual book?
Well, I started with spirituality when I was really young. The student of Swami Satchidananda. And I think I've told you that for sure, but the rest of you. And I appreciate the question. Scientists aren't going to read a whole lot about this stuff. Like I can write a book in the middle between science and philosophy, and scientists won't really read it, but philosophers will, and people who are just not philosophers, but in their lives are philosophers. So I wrote the book for a certain audience that's more general, and to do that, I wanted to make it less heady. I'm super comfortable in my head, so I wanted to get out of my own comfort zone and do something that was more impactful. I wrote academic papers for the purpose of the science. And actually my first big paper came out when this was in published process, and I referenced a lot of it. So it's in there, but in much more storytelling kind of way. The science of time is in there, and it really, time we think of as a steady stream of separate moments. The way I understand time here is a storyline through past, present, and future. So you don't think of your life as individual moments, but as an arc of a journey or a plot. It's a very different way of understanding the choices that we're making, because there's a context. There's a place you're coming from, a place you're at, and a place you're going to. And the choices are going to be different in different contexts. So for me, understanding the whole arc as a single thing rather than discrete moments, that's really scientifically based, but it's really written for lay folks like us. Spiritual. It is spiritual, right? Connectedness over time. I learned about some indigenous cultures conceive of time as timeless. Past ancestors have not gone anywhere, not behind us in the past. It's all here now. We're here in the ever now, right? Timeless, changeless, eternity. That's already understood by many cultures. That's what this is pointing to in a way. So it's really fun to discover that from the science perspective in the Western world. Come back to that. Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, where are these choices made from? And we could be thinking so much about a choice and get frozen in our brains. We can take this from intuitive places. They make us. They happen from a synchronistic moment. I suppose all of the above and many more. What's your sense of where these choices are made from?
It's a deep question. What I love about this topic is, for me, it's become very practical. So that's the practical. I'll answer practically. To come from experience of having done it differently a number of times. Yeah, here's an example. So last week in class, we did a project building kites. We had 2 weeks to go and we built a project building kites. Remember the kites? These are the great kites. And I had a project building atoms as well from the previous semester, which you did. And I want to do them both. But I have learned through trial and error many times that when I try and fit too much in, it's not pleasant. So Monday of this week, we finished the kite project and I was like, we're just going to do a quick version of the atoms project. And I could tell like all the signs were saying no, like I couldn't find the parts I needed. People had other stuff to do, they weren't ready for it. But I forced it, like, we're going to do it because I want to do it. So where does that choice come from? That choice came from a part of me that was attached. It saw value in me doing this project with them because I already had the parts. It feels satisfying. I feel like it'd be a failure if I didn't get all the material. Avoiding failure, seeking success, my version of success. Immediately I realized it was the wrong thing to do. We just did not have time, and most of the kids weren't into it. We had a few takers and they did it well. The rest of them, I just like, you know what? I realize this is wrong. Let's back up. In the past, I might have kept pushing forward. This time I backed up, figured out how to adapt and sort of pull back and not require it and slow down. But that's the idea. It came from many times doing it a different way, pushing my agenda, just like with my conversation with the kid about homework, pushing my agenda and having it backfire on me in really unpleasant conversations. There's an attachment in there that I'm just stuck on. Something I'm wanting to have happen a certain way. And there's fear that I'm avoiding. That's for failing a math test. Or not getting all the projects in the semester.
Sounds like it's about accurately reading the signs.
Yeah, accurately reading the signs. And if the signs are really just, what I try to do in this book is say the signs are, how do we really feel about something? How do other people really feel? What are they really experiencing? The more we can become connected to what people are really going through, that allows us to experience synchronicity. Versus our own version of reality that we're laying onto the world, interpreting through our lens. So if I can leave you with one thing, instead of looking for signs out there around us, try to peel back the filters on what people are experiencing. See them for what they're actually experiencing. Ask questions. Take away our own judgments long enough to really inquire what's really going on around us. And when I do that, like with this project in class, I make better choices about how to bring people along in my journey. Thanks for that question. How are we doing on time?
It's 8. It's 8.
Okay, time for one last question. Students? Yeah, Renee.
Can you talk about intention and how our intentions affect those probabilities in the concept of a holographic multiverse? Like how there
How intentions affect probabilities.
probabilities and the fact that there's parallel universes happening and parallel potentially us's happening and having experiences and how that intention can create a ripple effect on all of it and that interconnectedness piece of it.
Need a drink of water for that one. Tequila. So, how do intentions affect the ways that we move through the multiverse? So these apples on your tree, take a look at your worksheet, students. The apples on your tree are the intended, felt intentions. So it's not necessarily an actual goal that I have to. I'll tell a story. last year, around this time, I was not working for the school. Ellie, I'm going to tell the story
What story?
that you wanted me to tell.
Okay.
So, I was not working for the school. We had an exchange student, and my daughter came home with reading a book about the bomb, building of the atomic bomb. We read that book together. It was super fun because it was about physics. I like physics. I like my daughter, so we got to bond. And I started wondering, more about the history of the building of the bomb. And we had this exchange student come from Germany, and she found herself talking to a lot of students at school about World War II. They were asking about her experience and culture in Germany now, what it's like to come from that side of the war. And that sort of came up again in a different context, this other sort of synchronicity about World War II. And then we got invited to see the movie Oppenheimer. Came out, right? Remember that last year? My wife has a good friend who is the granddaughter of Frank Oppenheimer. Frank is one of the two brothers that worked on the Manhattan Project, Frank and Robert. Frank started the Exploratorium, Science Museum. Now, I went to the Exploratorium as a kid, over and over again. And I went there as a teacher to get trained about 20 years ago. So I'm deeply intertwined with them and inspired by what they do. I even realized that I wouldn't have be a scientist if it wasn't for what I got from them. So I read this book about Frank, went to see him and meet his grandkids and his family, the screening, private screening in the city. It was like, for a physicist, it was a dream. And I came away going, wow, I can see myself as a teacher. Because I see in Frank there's this revolutionariness, there's this science, there's this education, all that goes together. I saw myself reflected in him. Within 2 weeks, I had an offer from, a little bit longer. My daughter came home from school without a teacher in science. It was a class I had taught before, the same textbook. I knew how to do it like the back of my hand. But the difference was I saw myself as a teacher again, because of this string of events that had led me to that point. I didn't have an intention to go back into teaching, but I had a deeper intention to connect personally, to feel more connection in my life, more community, to do science. And I didn't know that meant teaching, but it does, doesn't it? I met these students and they've shown me sort of a clearer reflection of myself than I can show myself, positive energy and non-judgment, and it's been so much more real than what I had planned. So I wouldn't say my intention was to do that, but my intentions were met along the way. Does that make sense? Yes.
I'd just like to say that's actually not how it happened. I said to you, I said to you as a joke, hey, you should be my teacher, and you took that literally.
That was a sculptor, right? I saw it the way I wanted to see it. Thank you very much.
Anytime.
Thank you to my students for showing up today and supporting me, and it's just great to be in your lives. Thank you all for coming out and supporting the book, and you've learned something here. And what? Well, I will stay and sign any books that you've got that you purchased tonight. Is that right? Allie? Anything else, Allie?
Well, traditionally we clap first.
Thank you.
You can go to synchronicityinstitute.com, and Sky also has a course on there that you can take.
The Living in Flow course. Yes. Synchronicityinstitute.com has my videos and my papers, my books. But you have books here available for sale?
Yes, whoever would like to get a copy of the book, we have them up by the front. If you'd like to get them signed, please just form an orderly line around this side of the group.
Over here. Thank you to the folks on live stream. Thanks for showing up. And thank you all for coming. It's great to have you.
Have any more of the
Right on.